Brittany, bitch.
Hey, y'all's balls. So, wow, that was probably a really inappropriate intro for this kind of video. So today I wanted to talk about something that has been bugging me a lot recently, actually. I feel that it's only best that I keep it real, keep it honest, keep it 100 with every single one of y'all's. I don't think I've talked about non-binary in months. I haven't talked about it in quite a while, and I haven't been open to my opinions on it because I felt as though there's a shift in the community, really, in the LGBT community, and there was a shift in me, and I didn't know exactly what that shift was, but I figured it out, finally. And it's taken me a little bit to form my opinions on this, and this is a video long in the making, really, if I'm being realistic here, because my opinions have changed, but I feel as though I should share my opinion on this because I wouldn't want somebody to say, non-binary isn't real, non-binary isn't real, non-binary isn't real. And then somebody to say, well, why would you think that? Because I watch Miss London on YouTube. When that's not exactly what I believe anymore. And I wouldn't want somebody to go around and spread that information that I don't think. And I feel like it's only best that I share my opinions and my new formed opinions and be real. I don't think I'm one to be like, oh, this is my side, I'm gonna stick to this side no matter what. And if you're that way, go do your thing. I'm not that way. As much as I'm not a real woman, I wanna be as real as possible. That was a joke, by the way. So, non-binary. So there's been a big discussion lately of non-binary and it being in the trans community. And I don't know why necessarily it blew up. Maybe it's because of the ContraPoints video, which is a very good video, by the way. I don't agree with everything in it, but I do think that's a very good video. I love Contra. I met the queen once, and she's such a fucking nice person. There's been a very big discussion about non-binary and it being in the trans community and what people thought about it being in the trans community. So my opinion went from one thing to another. And at first and for a long time, I did not believe they were in the trans community. And I was proven wrong. I was wrong about non-binary not being in the trans community and shouldn't be in the trans community. The definition of transgender is basically anything outside of cisgender, and that covers a big ground. And non-binary people, in my opinion, fit that ground because they are outside of cisgender. While I do believe that non-binary is a smaller population than a lot of people think, I feel like there's a portion of people who identify as non-binary that use non-binary as a gradient or as like a way to go from one thing to another and not just like it being jammed down your throat. And I feel like non-binary is almost in a way an experimental phase for some people. And in that experimental phase, I wouldn't say that it's them being non-binary. Just like I don't think I was ever cisgender really. I was always trans. I was always going to be trans. So for some, I think it's just a transition within a transition, and that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to figure yourself out. But for this video, I do want to put distinctions between things. And no, I'm not erasing a community. I am simply defining things within a community. I'm simply defining things that are very important because of the outcome. I want to define two definitions, transsexual and transgender. For a while, I believe transsexual was an outdated term. I felt like it really gave trans women a bad name because it insinuated that we're like prostitutes, all sexual and shit, and that's where the sexual came from. But really, sexual in the transsexual definition points towards sex. Now, the transsexual definition is binary, considering sex is binary. Also considering there is no non-binary sex. Transsexual is transitioning within sex, and that's not saying I'm changing my sex. It's feeling strictly aligned with the opposite sex. It's not me saying I'm changing my sex when I transition. I most certainly am not changing my chromosomes when I transition. I am most certainly not changing my sex when I transition. And also I want to clear up that transsexual isn't just about medically transitioning. It isn't just about having surgeries. It's not just about the want to have surgeries. You can be transsexual and not have any surgeries. You can be transsexual and not have hormones yet, because I was transsexual when I was 5. I was transsexual when I was 6, 7, 8, you know. I was transsexual long before I was on hormones. But I do want to define transsexual and transgender because of the outcome. And that's what a lot of people are fighting about on Twitter. Basically, what I mean with outcome is a non-binary person will have a different outcome than a binary trans person, will want a different outcome than a binary trans person. I would think that a non-binary person's goal would be to present as the authentic selves that they are. And with presenting as the authentic non-binary selves that they are, I feel like their goal would be to present non-binary and to present in a not binary fashion. And that's perfectly beyond fine. But transsexual is strictly a binary term. Transgender is anything but cis, and it is anything but a binary term. Therefore, non-binary people being trans, transsexuals being trans. But they are two different terms that mean two different kinds of outcomes of that transition. The big problem I had with non-binary as a identity was I didn't want the people and I didn't want the identity to speak for me. And I feel like that's with a lot of other YouTubers, and that's their problems and contentions they have with the identity. And sorry, if you hear a noise, I'm just playing with this. I need to stop playing with it. But in all honesty, I just don't give a shit anymore. I am 4 years on, 15, 16, 17. I'm about 4 years on hormones here. I am 5 years out. Right? 15, 16, 17. I am 5 years out, 4 years on hormones, and I'm just at the point right now where I don't give a shit because I represent myself, nobody else represents me for me. And the people who try to represent me for me, London. Brilliant. Are just going to be wrong. I love the trans community. I love the LGBT community in general. I'm my own independent person, you see. I love the trans community. I love them backing me up. I just think I'm at the point right now in my transition where, you know, a non-binary person, you know, saying you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, just, it never affected me. And if it does affect me at one point, I will most certainly go off. But I'm at the point actually where, like, it's been said, and I disagree with that statement still, no matter, like, I really do disagree with that statement. You don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, because I feel that even non-binary people have a form of dysphoria, because even in the definition of dysphoria itself, it's feeling out of place. It's feeling a disconnect. And I feel like non-binary people feel that disconnect too. Otherwise they wouldn't have a motivation to transition too. Just like transsexual people. Transgender people have gender dysphoria. Transsexual people have gender dysphoria. And that form of gender dysphoria just so happens to come in many forms. It's just, that's how I see it personally. If you disagree, by all means disagree. We all know the rundown of you can disagree. But what I'm saying is that these people that I heavily disagree with, until they start directly affecting me and affecting my transition, I kind of just don't give a shit anymore, really. And I don't think I should give a shit at this point, you know, unless of course it affects my transition, my hormones and shit like that. I'm not a trans activist. If I helped you in any way, and if I possibly saved your life, if I did anything to influence you, that's absolutely amazing. That's great. I fucking love that. But I'm not a trans activist. I'm here just standing up for my opinions and what I think. I'm kind of against making life harder than it should be. And I feel like with just a lot of things in the trans community, it's kind of making life harder than it should be, and I'm not a big fan of it. So I heard some people say, well, London, if you're talking about outcome, you're gonna have a different outcome than a trans man. By definition, transsexual doesn't only just align with trans women, it's trans men as well, therefore it being binary, and it's transitioning within a binary sexual alignment. But overall, now I think non-binary is real, and there would be times on live streams or times on my Instagram story, and this just would be brought up naturally, where a person would tell about their friend that felt dysphoric as either sex, as either role. What does that mean? Non-binary. Like that's the answer. And I kind of would just blow it off before because I really didn't know the answer, and now I pretty much know the answer, and that's because they're non-binary. If they feel dysphoric as operating as male, if they feel dysphoric about operating as female, and they feel more comfortable with a gray area, that's non-binary. It's not a binary because it's outside of the binary, and that is transgender. And I feel, you know, as I said earlier, a non-binary person saying trans rights, a non-binary person saying they're transgender, for the first thing, I don't care. For a non-binary person to say trans rights and all that shit and they are a part of the trans community is just entirely accurate. And I believe that since they transitioned outside of anything from their birth sex, it's within the T on LGBT. When I think about it, like the outcome that I want for the trans community and any trans person, including non-binary of course, is just to be less dysphoric and happy with themselves. And I feel, wow, I'm getting emotional. I shouldn't be getting emotional, but I am. Really, the outcome that I want and I've always wanted is just for people to be happy with themselves. And before, when I would say, you know, you're non-binary and going on hormones and getting top surgery and shit like that, like you're just not gonna be happy. You're not non-binary. You're fucking up your body. And, you know, that's a very authoritarian thing to say to somebody. And whenever I would say that, whenever I would say, you know, this non-binary isn't real because you're just gonna fuck up your body, and I know some people who have regretted it, it came from a place of, please don't fuck up your body because I don't want you to be sad. I don't want you to be displeased with your body, because imagining a person displeased with their body after transitioning is a nightmare. For me personally, and I know for some people it's not as big of a nightmare, it's not as big of a deal, but to me, that's just the biggest deal. Transitioning is life altering. Transitioning medically is in many ways permanent, and whether it's a big permanence or a small permanence, it should not be taken lightly. Questioning your gender should not be taken lightly. And I've said that back then, and I'll continue to say questioning your gender should not be taken lightly. It is something that will affect your life forever. And you need to really look into yourself. But I just want people to not be dysphoric. I want the goal of the trans community for me, and my goal here in the trans community is to support myself. And overall, for people to be happy with their bodies and with themselves. And if somebody is happy producing estrogen or on estrogen and having top surgery, who the fuck am I to say you won't be happy with that? You shouldn't be happy with that. Like, that's hypocritical of me to do, because that's all I want for myself and all I would want anybody else to say about myself. You know, I had people doubting my transition for a long time and saying I was just gonna fuck up my body. And for me to do that, oh my God. To say that to another group of people and be like, you're just gonna fuck up your body, non-binary isn't real and shit, and making them possibly question shit, hurts my heart. And that's why I'm making this video today, to clear up that it's very much a real thing to me now, and I very much understand. While I don't understand every bit of it, nor will I ever, because I'm not a non-binary person, I concede that it's very much a real thing. They very much are trans people, and they very much have gender dysphoria, and they are very much in pain as much as any other trans person would be, whether it's a lot of pain, whether it's a little bit of pain. You know, we all face that bit of pain from gender dysphoria and being isolated in this world. And I think that I concede that we're all living on this earth and all want, whether, even if it is a different outcome, at the end of the day, because we are all trans, we want the same outcome of self-love. And that's where I really want to get at with this video, is that, you know, even in my past videos of saying non-binary isn't real and shit, it came from a good place, just didn't go about it in a right way at all. And I think these people are trans. I can't say it more than I am. I think these people are trans. While I do want to differentiate, of course, transsexual and transgender, because in a medical basis, on a medical stance, I think it is important to differentiate that transsexuals usually will want binary outcomes. But for other people, they will not understand a person with a full-grown beard getting breast implants. And I feel like for their community, for the transgender community should say, well, this is why this happens. This is why this happens. And for a bit too, I was like, I just really want these people to advocate their own community. Why can't they have their own non-binary community, which is definitely a community, but it is the trans community. So I feel like the transgender community should concentrate on meeting halfway with people who don't understand. I believe people like Ash Hardell do a good thing and do the LGBT community a service by saying, I'm non-binary and this is what I go through. It's different than what London goes through. It's different what insert trans man goes through. But this is what I go through, and while it is different, we all are transitioning, and we all are transitioning in some way. And I will still criticize the transgender community, because I will always criticize someone that says, if you don't want to date a trans person, you're transphobic. And even you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. Like, I'll always criticize that, and I will always be critical of my community. That doesn't mean I don't love my community. In fact, it means I love that community so much that I'm willing to criticize it just so I can put my opinion out there, and so that hopefully it can better itself. But overall, I think non-binary is transgender. I don't believe non-binary is transsexual. I do believe it's transgender. I believe transsexuals and transgenders are all in the T in LGBT and are all in the trans movement. We all share the want for no discrimination and for the states to support us, or at least in America. We want the world to support us, basically. So that's my rant of a video. Anyway, thank y'all's balls so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do what you do, and I'll see y'all's balls in the next video. London, out. Okay, literally this is just me from 2 seconds later. Also, I do want to add that all these conversations don't mean a lot to the rest of the world. 99.9% of the world doesn't get this shit. Having these specific discussions is, I'm not saying a waste of time. I'm glad we're having these discussions, but just keep in mind that 99.9% of the world doesn't know what the fuck we are talking about. While I think they should know what we're talking about, and while I think they should be educated, and hopefully one day they will be, I just want to point out that a lot of the world doesn't, and having these discussions, I want to concentrate on topics more that affect outside of the trans community. When I respond to transphobic people, when I am critical of something specifically in the trans community, it has an overall affecting of not just specific people in the trans community or a small part of the trans community that we're having this little debate about that has no validity outside of the trans community. I'm going to talk about things that have validity outside of the trans community. My goal with my YouTube videos is to bring people together and meet halfway. Cis, trans, meet halfway. I know a lot of people could just be like, it's not our job to educate. It's not our this, that, and the other. Who gives a shit outside of the trans community? Well, I give a shit, and I care about what people think about the trans community. And the only way we are gonna get things like legislations helping us, acts helping us, people helping us, is if we meet them halfway, get them to understand, and further our community and our rights and our legacy.